let's now look at the feasibility study in any project. This is generally overlooked. Even in certification, details about feasibility study, it doesn't go in depth. But generally, feasibility study is very important for any of the projects. So to have a feasibility study, the first step is of course, the business case. A business case is developed during the early stages of a project, which outlines why, what, how, who necessary to decide is it worthwhile to continue a project. Worthwhile in the sense, any project, there needs to be an investment made. So there need to be, if there is going to be investment, one need to decide what is the return on the investment which is made. So based on that, the organization decides whether to go ahead with a project or postpone it for some more time till maybe the market matures to accept the product, or maybe like they have to maybe refine the project further based on the returns. Just as an example, like each product needs to be based on the timing, it needs to be introduced into the market. You should not be ahead of time, then the product may not really pick up. It need to be at a right point of time. Just an example, as a product needs to be at a right point of time, an ideal example could be like the social network site like Orkut. When you compare with Facebook, Orkut was, early 2000s social networking site, but it was perceived something like a dating site, and it didn't really pick off, and finally, eventually, it had to be shut out. But you compare with that with Facebook, yes, it was introduced right point of time when the web was accepted across the globe, and it was, the data, the internet data became cheap, so that there were more takers, and quickly Facebook was able to succeed in its launch. So all this is determined through the feasibility study. We'll see that how. So in a nutshell, so anything which you're launching here, as an example, launching, setting up of a manufacturing facility in a new geography or a country, you need to have a business case, and business case has to be supported with a necessary feasibility study. That is important. So it can be a manufacturing facility, or it can be a kind of a web-based application. It needs to be introduced at a right point of time so that you are able to have the return on investment. Similarly, the other one could be ERP system. So you might have in the existing system, you might have bottlenecks. An organization can have bottlenecks. So whether you need to go for use this existing system or go for a new ERP system, if you go for a new ERP system, then whether that will fetch the adequate return on investment, that needs to be identified. So big topic, so many things needs to be identified, so many things, parameters needs to be identified, and then that needs to be provided as a feasibility report, which is supported with a business case. So the business case will trigger the feasibility study. Based on the feasibility study output, a business case is built and provided to all the stakeholders to decide whether to go for a project or to postpone it at a later point of time, or to drop. Even in some cases, one might drop the project itself based on the business case. So what is a feasibility study and why feasibility study is needed? The feasibility study should provide the management enough information to decide whether project can be done on the timeline. That is also important. Like you need to have a change, because if the timelines are not adhered to, there will be cost overrun. Ideally, there could be a schedule overrun. When the schedule is going to get extended, naturally there will be a cost overrun as well. So we'll see that. What is the schedule? How do we determine the cost? Those things we'll see. Whether the final product will benefit the intended users. What are the alternatives among which solution will be chosen. So is there alternatives? All these are determined, to the feasibility study itself could be a kind of a project where experts are involved, who are knowledgeable about the market, knowledgeable about the product, knowledgeable about how it is going to future, what is the requirement. Based on that, they got to conduct the feasibility study. Resources and investment requirement, break-even profitability timeline, all this needs to be decided, and that is where one requires a feasibility study. So based on the comprehensive feasibility study, the management makes a go or no go decision whether it is worth the investment. Say for example, like there is something called cost of capital. If you invest $100 in a bank, if it is going to give you an interest of 5% per annum, that means you'll be earning $5 in 1 year, which is $105 is the return. So there is no point in going for a project which is going to fetch you only just $2 for $100 invested in 1 year, because for that you can go for a safe investment, put it in a fixed deposit and earn $5. Whereas if it is going to provide you with the $15 to $20 or $30, yes, then it is a definitely one need to go for that project, because the returns are much more. It is more than the $5, that is the 5% interest per annum. It is you're earning for the capital, you're earning to 20 to 30%, which is $20 or $30 for 100 each 100 rupees invested. Yes, that is where it makes management makes a wise decision to make that investment. So all this is done through the feasibility study. And again, this is one area which is again could be overlooked, because when you do a project feasibility study, all this needs to be done: technical feasibility, economic, legal, operations, scheduling. See, some of them in some project you may do or you may not do. Legal feasibility, whether the legal laws, the statutory requirements, you may or may not do in all projects. But yes, most of the project you might do a technical and economic. Of course, the operationals and scheduling, some of them the focus is more on technical feasibility, and some of them on the operational feasibility, some of them on the scheduling. So it all depends on what is the product is all about, what is the project is all about. Based on that, the feasibility studies are conducted on these areas. So we'll progress in depth into all the areas of the technical feasibility study. Stay tuned. And all this will, based on these feasibility study, this needs to be a project feasibility report needs to be provided, which goes into the business case. So the technical feasibility one need to determine whether there is the suitable technical infrastructure available for the project in country or that location. An example could be like the internet is so very common in almost across the globe. The broadband is common across the globe. It was not that common about, it was just the dial-in network about a decade back. Broadband, Wi-Fi network, it has become common in the last decade. So any kind of a product which was introduced, which is related to the Wi-Fi broadband, we have almost reached the saturation. Yes, if it is about a decade back, yes, yeah, it is a market which is coming up. So any devices which works on broadband or which works on the Wi-Fi would have got the better market. Say for example, your mobile phones. Now you can connect to the Wi-Fi. Assume if there had been a mobile phone with a Wi-Fi capability about 15 years back, most of the countries would not have the Wi-Fi capability there. So there is no point in having that feature in the mobile phone. So it would not be, even though it would have cost a fortune to have that in the mobile phone, and there is no use because the proper infrastructure was not there. Similarly, now there is something called 5G. We have 4G, 5G is coming up in next few years. If there are products which is capable supporting or using 5G, yes, the market absorption is going to be may be very good in 2 3 years down the line. And similarly, something called narrowband for IoT applications. So that is coming up as well. So if there are products which is related to that, for now, one can then, yes, plan about, because there's technical infrastructure going to be available in the future, near future, I would say, in 2 3 years down the line for 5G. So yeah, they could go ahead, and if there is new product which is going to cater to that, or which uses that market, that which is based on that application, yeah, one could go ahead um, and say that, hey, this is technically feasible to have a product around 5G because the network is coming up. Had it been some 5 to 7 years before, there's no point, because there is no 5G network at all. So all this, when you want to have a product, because from a project, project output could be a product. So one need to do perform the technical infrastructure feasibility study when they want to have a product introduced. So that is part of the technical feasibility. And next one is, of course, there is whether the technical expertise for the product is available. This is generally, this is where normally you'll have something called a joint ventures, in the sense a foreign company somewhere, I mean, an US based company, or a Japanese company, or South African, or even, I mean, South Korean, or even the Chinese company could have a joint venture with the local partner, because they might have a technical expertise, join hands with the local partner. The reason being, the local partner will have knowledge on the legal aspects, and they will be in a position to get deep penetration in the market. So joint venture is quite common for any product which has been launched to by a company in a country, and later on they can acquire the shares of a joint venture company and have their own presence in a country. So some cases, yes, there are already available technical expertise. Yes, the company can directly acquire some of the consultant and then go ahead making their own investment. So this is also important, the technical expertise for the product or the project. And this is again a repeat. So that is what I said. Generally, joint ventures between two companies are quite common when they are getting into a new market. Yeah, it's again the same point. Is joint venture a solution? So this is as a part of it. If it's highly technical product, technical feasibility study is very critical and very important, and lot of emphasis is provided on the technical feasibility. Economic feasibility is all about the cost benefit analysis, return on investment, net present value, break even analysis. We'll be seeing later on the project capitals. So a break even analysis is something like you make investment of 100 USD, that is going to be the fixed investment, and then on a yearly basis something like a variable investment, because to keep the to have the plant running, maybe $20 per year is going to be incurred. So one need to have something like a return of the second year $150 or something. Then yes, there is a break even, because you had over the investment made, there is return of $30. If you get about $150, 120, 100 is the fixed, 20 is the variable, 120 total, 150 is the return. So you have something like a $30. Then it is about approximately 15%. A quick calculation. So all these are done as a part of break-even analysis, as part of the economic feasibility study. So basically this covers, say, project capital, more of a project budgeting. We'll see that at project proposal stage itself, all this is done. And what is more important is that all this is done, and then during execution is what the earned value analysis, because once whatever is planned, it is baselined, and based on the baselining, one performs the earned value analysis, whether there is schedule variance is there, cost variance is there during the project execution. Suppose if you are putting up a plan, whether you are progressing as per the schedule cost. All these are performed in the earned value analysis. Or a software implementation, ERP implementation, which can take months. So whether you are progressing as per the initial budgeted plan, that needs to be performed through the earned value analysis. So legal feasibility, this is you may do it, or you may, depends on the project, you may perform the legal feasibility, basically the location government regulations for the project, whether the environmental, if there is environment clearance is required, whether the statutory approvals are needed. Suppose some countries, if you want to set up a manufacturing plant, needs to have appropriate approvals from what is the product or the process is environment hazards, its output is environmental hazards. So all this need to be determined, and statutory approvals need to be provided. Labor laws, how is the labor law in the country, whether it is investor friendly or it is towards the employees, all these needs to be determined. At times it is overlooked, but at times it may not be really needed as well. It all depends on the product, what is being introduced, and then might take a legal feasibility study, or at times you might not take the legal feasibility study. We'll also see there are two more things, which is more of during the execution stage, which happens, that is the operational feasibility and scheduling feasibility. We'll quickly see that in the next presentation. Thank you. And the scheduling feasibility, this is critical as well, and at times this is also overlooked. One point is that people tend to resist change. This problem can be overcome. If so, how? This is very common in a new system or a new process being introduced in a company. Suppose people are used to a particular type of accounting system or an ERP system, maybe a manual process, they are good in the manual process, and all of a sudden something computer-based systems are introduced. People tend to resist that unless they are properly trained in that. If the proper training is provided and benefits are clearly explained to them, then they may use it. So generally during an implementation team, we look at getting the requirement from the key users and may implement a product, but the actual users, the users of the because data entry operators like the purchasing clerk or the receivables clerk, if they are not trained properly or if they are not educated properly providing the benefits of the system, they might not use it, not only use it, but they will keep pointing the problems of the system. So it is very critical, like what is that to operate that particular product, which is an output of a project like a ERP system. What is that needed to ensure that the users or the people use that system? So there need to be a kind of a feasibility study towards the operating that particular product. So that is about the operational feasibility. Then the scheduling feasibility. You cannot sometimes know, due to the over ambitious effort on the management part, they might because they would have done on the economic feasibility study, it would have been determined that there is no competitor. If they introduce the product right now, the product could be a real monopoly in the sense, because there's no competitor, they can dictate, the company can, or the management can dictate the price to the customer because there's so high demand. So in that case, what they will do is like unreasonable deadlines. They want to somehow make the manufacturing plant or something in matter of instead of having that in 6 months, they want to have it in 2 months, which can create problems. The implementation would not go in the right way. So one need to be very careful whether the scheduling, that is the timelines, are correct enough so that you can have the product product or the project up and running at the right point of time. So all this is part of the scheduling feasibility. Given the technical expertise or the project deadline reasonable, or is the estimation of effort, dependency Dependency meaning whether you cannot, for example, in a building without the foundation activity complete, you cannot go for a walls construction. You need to have the foundation completed and then you can go for the walls or the ceiling construction. All the dependencies are completely completed and then the next activity should start. So we need to have the scheduling feasibility, and at each stage what are the risks, all those needs to be captured. So any missed schedule can cause overrun in the schedule, and if there is a schedule overrun, naturally there is going to be an additional cost. Say for example, if 100 days project needs to be completed, instead it takes 200 days, for each day there is going to be an additional cost. So that's about the feasibility study, the operational and the scheduling feasibility study, apart from the economic feasibility, which is quite critical. And as pointed out, the project budgeting is very, very important. There are formulas to compute the project budgeting. We'll see that separately in a discussion. Thank you. The output of the feasibility, the studies conducted, like the technical, economic, and then the legal, the operational scheduling, is a kind of a project report. So based on that study, a final feasibility project report is generated, and this is presented to the management, who then decide to go for it, go for the project or not go for it. And then comes actually building up the project itself and giving a authorization to have the project in place. So what's a feasibility study? The report will have an executive summary. I mean, the feasibility project report will have an executive summary description about the product or service being envisaged to offer, the technical, legal, the statutory requirement, all the inputs from the feasibility study are provided over here. And then the marketplace, the market strategy, outcome of all this is based on the market research and the surveys, whether the market has the potential to accept the product or not. Even that is provided, because based on that, you will have this one, that is the financial projections, that is the cash flows, profit loss, balance sheet, all your returns of investment. Because if there is a market for the product, yes, then only it is going to be profitable. Otherwise, the project will not be profitable. So based on this, then comes the capital requirement, funding of capital requirement, whether it is equity, debt, or a joint venture. These are relatively financial terms, like what is a debt, what is an equity. I'll not be covering in it. Yes, if you are interested, yes, there is another course I have created that's on the financial management. If you're a kind of a non-technical person, I would suggest to opt for that course. Then you need to have the financial projection, that is from the project budgeting, that is cash flows, profit, loss, and the balance sheet. These are just projections. These are not actuals. The actuals will come into play only when the project starts executing and it becomes operational. Then only you will know the actuals. But this is again based on the research which is done. What is your projected cash flow, profit, loss, and balance sheet? So this is projected one, because based on the study you would have done this. So this is taken as an input, and they will try to track it. The management will try to track it when the actual project is executed and it becomes operational at a later point of time. And finally, the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat, the SWOT analysis. This is actually critical as well. What is the strength of the company? Is there any weaknesses about the company operating that region? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? Whether there is a political stability in that country, all that is determined, and it is presented as a part of SWOT analysis in the feasibility project report. So this is again an input to the management team to decide whether to go ahead with the project or not. So thank you.